What's up, guys? Welcome back to the show. Back in the backyard here. I'm going to give you guys a list. I got about 5 players here you may want to consider cutting to save your fantasy football season. Now, I've got a bunch of other players I'm going to mention as well. Guys like Tyreek Hill, who's in a terrible situation. But these 5 players are big names. They were high draft capital guys, and they just aren't performing. So you may want to trade them. I'll tell you how to trade them, what to do, and how to save your fantasy football season in general, guys, if you guys were having a bad record. Now, if you guys got 16 rounds, you're probably looking in good shape. If you didn't, you might want to pay attention, or even if you got 60 rounds, it's still a good video to pay attention to. Big video here, guys. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys smash it, tap it, slap it, hit the thumbs up, guys. Ready to dive in, okay? Now, I'm in the backyard here. I haven't done a backyard video in a while. I can hear some crickets here. I haven't mowed the lawn in a while. I got to clean up here. We're in fall right now, so I've kind of let some of that stuff go. But I want to do a backyard video. The sun was nice here. Enjoy last little bit of, the nice weather before winter kicks in. It's cold here in the Northeast. So wanted to get this video out here for you. We are heading into fantasy football week 4 already. Can you believe that? So again, I want to make sure you guys are in good shape going into this week. I did a video, go back and check it out, on some starts and sits for week 4. Go back and check that. Just did that yesterday. A must-watch video for sure, okay? If you're new to the channel, smash it, tap it, slap it. Let's dive into this video, okay? Now, there's a ton of players that just aren't performing, okay? Guys like Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, there's Deebo Samuel's been hurt. Injuries have been taken over. Now, again, I've been fortunate enough with my teams that nobody's been hurt. Now, in one league, I had Jake Ferguson hurt. He's back. Had a good week last week. He's the tight end that I believe in a year where tight ends are an absolute disaster. So I'm very fortunate. Jake Ferguson's back. That was the only injury I had, knock on wood. And, I've been very fortunate. But to a lot of people, they're crying. CMC, I told you to avoid him. He's been a disaster. There's been a ton of injuries, guys. Like I said, Deebo Samuel and a ton more. Tua Tagovailoa, obviously that's impacted Tyreek Hill, Waddle, and these quarterbacks, when they go down, it really ripples down. Okay, but the first quarterback I want to talk about that you may want to cut, and he's on the cover of this video here, is Anthony Richardson. Okay, currently sitting at 19th amongst quarterbacks. This is absolutely brutal. Okay, now this is a guy I told you to avoid. Okay, he was almost like drafting a rookie quarterback. You didn't know what to expect. All I saw from last year was the guy that rushes the ball a lot. I didn't see much in the passing game, and sure enough, I was absolutely right. This guy's got a 49% completion rate so far. 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in the first 3 games. 6 interceptions in 3 games, guys. It's brutal. Okay, this guy was drafted as a top 5 quarterback. I said, do not spend a early draft capital pick on a guy with so much uncertainty. And I told you guys, anchor your team with today's quarterback. And if you got 16 rounds, I was telling you, Josh Allen is the guy to get. I did it in all my mock drafts. Go back and rewatch that. If you got 60 rounds, if you didn't get 60 rounds, make sure you get 16 rounds next year. But listen to this. To put this in context for you, okay, the completion percentage, Lamar Jackson, who doesn't throw a lot, is at a 65% completion rate. Josh Allen's at a 75% completion rate. And Jaden Daniels, the rookie, is at 80% completion rate, okay? And 55 passer rating, for Anthony Richardson, sitting again 19th amongst quarterbacks. Terrible start. So what I would do, and again, when you're looking at trading these guys, it's going to be tough to trade low. Okay, but what you could do with like an Anthony Richardson is, I think people still believe that early, preseason hype on him, you might still be able to get a good trade on him. I would try to dump him off. Some people are asking if I should dump him in a waiver wire. You could wait for a pinnacle game and maybe spark a trade and get top value for him. But again, Anthony Richardson, I'm not sold on. Try to cut him, get rid of him while you can. And if you got 60 rounds, you definitely didn't draft him, okay? Number 2 here, I want to talk about him is Christian McCaffrey. Now, from what I hear, he was in Germany getting special treatment. You see me on my Instagram. If you're not following Instagram, follow at Fantasy Football Counselor. Christian McCaffrey, a lot of people are still holding on, hoping for some sort of end-of-the-season type miracle. Listen, he could come out and be a league winner at the end of the year, but he's going to be out, man, at least another 3 to 4 weeks. And when he comes back, Jordan Mason has solidified his spot. So even if he comes back, they're not going to give him the full workload, right? They're going to preserve him probably till playoffs, and they're going to integrate, Mason's been solid. So why not integrate a guy who has been performing? So again, I would take a look at it and say, hey, I could probably still get some value for Christian McCaffrey and trade him off, get something, right? Or maybe when he comes back the first week, or when there's anticipation that he's going to come back, you trade him away then and get some top dollar for him, because when he comes back and people realize that he's splitting that volume with Mason, they're going to be really, really upset, okay? So again, CMC could be viable, but I think more in playoff times if they end up making the playoffs, okay? Number 3 here, I want to talk about DeAndre Swift sitting as RB41. Again, these are the rankings currently right now heading into week 4. That's where he's sitting in the rankings. DeAndre Swift, again, years to wow us, word out loud, was never a guy that finished the season, did well last year because he was on an offense that produced and helped him be viable. This year, a lot of people drafted DeAndre Swift thinking that he can be the RB1. He sucks. And that's the issue this year. There's been a lot of players, particularly running backs, that are slated as the RB1, but they're not RB1 worthy. They're just not that good. So DeAndre Swift, RB41 right now, 1.8 yards per carry is what he's been averaging. He's had 68 yards rushing in 3 games and 0 touchdowns, okay? Guys, 19 points on the entire season on three weeks. So this is a guy that people thought would be a true RB1. Again, there's a lot of fakes and phonies as RB1s, and DeAndre Swift is one of them. I would wait for a high game, if he ever gets a high game, or scores a touchdown for that matter, and trade high because he sucks, okay? Number 4 here, very, very important, is Rachaad White. Now, in my 16 rounds, I do a bunch. I basically lay out options at each round, right? He was a recommend in 3rd round, but there was a note saying he's safe, he's boring. I specifically said that I don't believe in him, but I got to give options. So yes, Rachaad White was a recommendation, but he was a recommendation for everybody. Now, I was telling everybody to stash Bucky Irving, okay? I have no Rachaad White stock, and if you watch my mock drafts, how 16 rounds is laid out is I make my recommendations, then I actually do a practical mock draft. I do 3 of them, actually. And in none of those did I actually draft Rachaad White, okay? Now, again, Rachaad White was a bust. I never believed in him 100%. This guy sucks. 2.1 yards per carry on the season. He's sitting at 30 fantasy points, sitting as RB32 in the rankings amongst running backs. This guy sucks. Now, in week 3, Bucky Irving had 9 attempts compared to the 6 that Rachaad White had. Rachaad White, again, nowhere in comparison, 7.8 yards per carry. And I think White had something like 2.8, something like that yards per carry. 6 attempts, 17 yards for Rachaad White in week 3. And compared to Bucky, 7.8 yards per carry on the 9 attempts. So, Bucky is the future here. He's just doing better when he gets the ball. So I would look to acquire Bucky Irving in your leagues. This guy is definitely emerging. He's clearly the better talent from what we've seen. Rachaad White is always boring. He was never a true RB1. I've said this for years. But I would definitely look at starting to get Bucky Irving on your roster. He's one of those guys that's up and coming, like Braylon Allen. I told you to stash while Bucky Irving. There's a bunch of guys that you could look to acquire, okay? Now, I've got one more player here that you want to get rid of, but let's give you some advice here on what you're doing and how to save your league here, because the video is like save your league. What you want to do, guys, is you want to kind of have an idea. By the way, in my Patreon group, you can join patreon.com/FF Counts for direct access to me. I've linked it below. Join the front lines. I do an actual Q&A for the generals in that group. But what I recommend doing is you got to look for trends, okay? You got to look for guys that are trending upwards. For example, Bucky Irving. You saw last week, he's trending upwards. Braylon Allen, right? Trending upwards, getting that volume. And you want to get rid of guys that are trending downwards, guys that just don't have that upside, don't have that ceiling. So, for example, Braylon Allen can be a league winner if Breece Hall goes down. Same with Blake Corum. Now, Blake Corum isn't doing anything. He is strictly dependent on an injury. And so is a guy like Trey Benson. But if the guys in front of him get injured, these guys are league winners. Braylon Allen is also the same way, but he's actually getting volume now. It's similar with Bucky Irving. So you got to take a look at the target counts, right? And get the guys that are emerging and the guys that are falling off, okay? And in this situation, like I said, Bucky Irving is a perfect example of a guy who's trending up, whereas White is trending down. And again, some of these guys I mentioned, DeAndre Swift, the Rachaad Whites, and some of these other guys that just aren't performing and are in bad situations. For example, Tyreek Hill, what you want to do is wait, not even wait, but if there is a pinnacle game, right? It happens, let's say week 4, Tyreek Hill has a 40-point game. You may want to trade him because, again, it's just not going to be consistent without Tua there, okay? So you got to take a look. Is it a one-week wonder situation? Is it an anomaly type week? You may want to trade him on an anomaly type week. We saw this with Isaiah Likely. If you owned Isaiah Likely, which nobody really did, in week 1, you could have traded high because that was an anomaly week where the alpha in that group, Mark Andrews, saw a bad week. And then you could have, traded Likely and got a lot for him. So again, people just buy the recency bias. So you want to be able to exploit that and trade off a pinnacle week and guys that are fakers and pretenders who had one pinnacle week. Okay, so you need to be really cognizant of this. Okay, very, very important. All right, now last guy here. Again, I told you to avoid this guy. I can't stress it enough, but Brandon Ayuk, he's sitting as wide receiver 58, 22 points on the season. It's bad, dude. 5 targets week 1, 5 targets week 2, 10 targets week 3, which was good. He got a little bit of an uptick, but even with Debo out, this guy's not crushing it. Now, if you look at his overall scope of how good this guy is, he's not really good. He's, in his 5th season or something like that. He had 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons, okay? Never over 9 touchdowns. This guy's never had 10 touchdowns a season. So, anyway, listen. Brandon Ayuk, if you can get a big game out of him, I would dump him off. There's just way too many targets to be had there. When Debo comes back, Kittle comes back, we see the emergence of Juwan Jennings. It's a disaster. That it's just too many mouths to feed, right? And I think you can still get a really good return on investment out of it, Ayuk. But we've seen the first 3 weeks he's done nothing. Maybe he has a pinnacle week, and he's that perfect example of a guy you could possibly trade and get a return on investment. Okay, so guys, I cannot emphasize this enough. You guys need to be aware of what's going on around you. Don't just buy the recency buys. And at this point, you should have your team and roster solidified. You kind of should know what you're doing and who to start, okay? And again, if you have any questions, drop them below. Join the Fantasy Front Lines if you got your answer guaranteed to be answered. But smash the thumbs up, hit the thumbs up, and drop a question below. I want to really help people as we get into NFL Week 4. So if you have any starts and sits questions for Fantasy Football Week 4, drop them below. I'll see what I could do to help you, okay? But again, if there's weight on your team, dead weight on your team that's just not pulling it for you, drop them, trade it. But you also don't want to sell low, okay? That's very, very important. So you need to be aware and just maximize your opportunities when you're trading or dropping, and be aware. Look for consistency, guys. And that's very, very hard to find in fantasy these days. Like a guy like Saquon, which I'm very fortunate to have in a lot of my leagues. Consistent players are hard to find, right? Like right now, Henry, Barkley, and Allen are anchoring a bunch of my teams. That's what you need. You need those consistent players. All right, guys? Smash it, tap it, slap it, hit the thumbs up. I appreciate you guys here. And drop your questions below. Have yourself an outstanding week 4. I'll keep the content rolling for you. Get out, enjoy some sunshine. I'm out.